Okay, I've returned, everyone. Anyway, we're getting ourselves fired up for a new playthrough of Final Fantasy VI. I won't be doing this one on stream because I've already done that a while back. So it'll be a while before this makes another return on the usual channel for the most part. But anyway, we need to start a new game off because for the tips tips and advice for Final Fantasy VI, I want to get started with a new game for the World of Balance. This is going to be covered in two different guides. The second one will be covered at a later date, eventually. But while we let the story play out, I am going to go over a little bit of history about my interest in Final Fantasy VI and why it's one of my favorite games. Um, Now, I would love to say this was my first RPG I got really into, but believe it or not, my first exposure to RPGs actually began with Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior 1. Now, until then, I didn't really have any interest. I mean, you were basically fighting monsters, and then, of course, you enter new areas and you're countering stronger monsters that decimated you. So I didn't really have this interest in RPGs because all of it was basically based in medieval times and whatnot. But my first actual RPG I got to own was Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Now, for those of you that do know about that game is actually tailored to help new players get into RPGs. And that was what Square did during 1992. Now, interestingly enough, I wanted to get Battletoads and Battle which came out around 1993, I believe. So, Mystic Quest came out the year before my birthday. So, unfortunately, my dad could not afford Battletoads and Battle at that time because the amount of money I was allowed to spend was not enough to cover the game. So, I ended up getting Final Fantasy Mystic Quest instead. And my word, the game was like nothing I've seen from Dragon Warrior / Quest because the music was phenomenally awesome. I mean, enemies showed damage whenever they took a large amount of damage, and the gameplay was great. Now, interestingly enough, I wound up sending a mail to Nintendo Power as to how to get past Falls Basin. Now, me and my brother, we played one file up to the point where we leveled Benjamin up to like level 25 or so. But we kind of screwed up and started a new file as a result. So we had a difficult time getting through that. But around level 25 with the regular axe, you're almost easily able to take out Alima. But nevertheless, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest really got me into RPGs. It is one of the factors that really made me love the Final Fantasy series in general. But if you're talking about main game wise, this game, which was called Final Fantasy 3 back then, which we now know as 6, is actually what got me into RPGs as a whole. And of course, none of us knew it at the time, but we were going to be going into two different parts of the game: the World of Balance and World of Ruin. And of course, the story and everything, and the gameplay, etc., was so great. In fact, to this day, it's got the largest amount of playable party members in a main Final Fantasy game. I don't think there's ever been in any other game that's ever come close to matching the massive amount of playable characters in a main Final Fantasy game. I mean, it's become more or less lesser characters being playable in later installments. I mean, to be fair, Final Fantasy 7 and 9 had pretty large cast of playable characters. But to be and then of course you got Final Fantasy 14, which I mean not 14 but 4, I should say, that pretty much also had a large playable cast of characters, but unlike 6, they just came and gone after certain parts of the game. But Final Fantasy 6 really got me into this. Of course, as you do know, I've been pretty much most of last year and I think early this year. I mean, I think it's pretty much last year making guides for each of the playable characters in Final Fantasy 6. I figure I want to contribute a little bit more towards this game in general. And of course, when I'm talking about Pixel Remaster, I'm talking about all versions of Final Fantasy 6. So basically, what this tips and advice guide is going to be doing is basically give players my advice as well as any tips I've picked up to help players get into this game. because Final Fantasy VI is definitely one of the greatest of all times for the GOATs. And I know people love Final Fantasy VII to death to the point they probably never played 6 before, or they just consider 7 to be their first and favorite. Well, for me, I can also relate because 6 is my favorite, and I will always consider this game to be my favorite out of all the Final Fantasies, no matter how better the other ones occur later on. But one general piece of advice I want to give to any player that's going into this game in general is that, for my advice, always search for more knowledge of the game that you want to get into, especially RPGs or anything like this. Because, like everyone else, I struggled to figure out what to do, complete side quests, and how in the world do you get through this? I mean, like I mentioned before, I had to write a letter to Nintendo Power for Final Fantasy Mystic Quest to get through a specific areas. And of course, back then in the early '90s and whatnot, there were very few strategy guides. There were hardly anyone, unless anyone had the game, you would basically have a large amount of difficulty trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes you would have to start over and try to learn what you learned the first time and whatnot. But technically, in my piece of advice, even though I am making a guide, always go search for knowledge of the game you want to get, because there's going to be people that have gotten further into the game and figured out more than you do, and always take advice. I mean, we now live in a day of age where we can go to YouTube or see other people playing this game, and or heck, even GameFAQs.com. There is tons of people that have pretty much went through the same thing I did, and they pretty much wrote their experiences, or even put out videos of them doing the gameplay, so it helps players get into what they want to be doing in the game. It always helps to know, gather any important information. Now, of course, I put out guides for beginner's guides for Marvel superheroes, as I did just now. But technically, one of the important pieces of advice to do is always search for knowledge of this game. I mean, my guide is going to be one of the small droplets of knowledge that's being put out for this game. So always seek out knowledge. If this tips and advice for the world of balance helps you, then good, because you're just getting one part of knowledge that's already out there, and it is available for everyone. So do not hesitate to search out other people, because there's other people that can do way better descriptions, guides, and stuff better than I can. I'm just doing it in a way that it's more simpler for me, but there's people that can do the more complex stuff than I can. So if you understand this important advice, then you've already taken your first big step into getting into Final Fantasy VI. Now, one of my first tips when you go into starting off in World of Balance, do not kill Biggs and Wedge right off the gate. Now, technically, we want to make Terra more stronger, but earlier on when you're in Narsh, earlier on, you do not want to kill Biggs and Wedge, because before we get into the mines, we have to fight the two guards and the Megalodonus, and they will basically, and if you take out your allies before you get into the mines, what happens is that one of them decides to cast Snowstorm, and Terra's like the only one on your team that's still alive. Basically, what happens is that she will no doubt take the full damage, because it does take into account the split damage, and without party members being alive, you're basically going to get hit full force with the attacks. So basically, you want to keep your allies alive, so that way you can keep Terra alive, and wait until you get into the mines to take out your allies, and then you can start training Terra up to get whatever levels you want. The second tip is going to be following up right after that, because you definitely want to prioritize getting Terra to level 6. One interesting quirk about this game is that any future party members that joins up is based off of Terra's levels. So they usually either be at 2 or 3 times the amount of levels that will be above your current party, or in this case, Terra's. So one of the reasons why we want Terra to be at level 6 is because Locke's starting level is going to be at level 8. And that if whenever Locke steals from enemies, It's basically heavily based on his level versus the enemy target, RNG, and other factors like the Thieves Racer and whatnot. So basically, we want to get Terra to level 6 so we can basically steal the Mithril Knife, which, by the way, is actually a way better weapon than the dagger that Locke starts off with. So another tip I would strongly advise players to take full advantage of is to always use Locke's Steal command during World of Balance. There's plenty of enemies in this game where you can steal a lot of relics, weapons, armor, and even consumables pretty early. And that could actually save you quite a bit of money. Now, one thing to keep in mind about stealing is that enemies will have a common and a rare steal. And when you go into battle, the game will randomly decide whether or not that enemy will have that said common or rare steal for the player to take. So that also depends on what you get. So technically we want to prioritize getting the rare steals because those are actually very good items to get for the most part. But most of the time that will not always happen. Now, Locke's Thief Racer actually helps improve his odds of getting common and rare steals. But at the same time, you got to remember that the game will automatically decide as to what you're going to probably get most of the time. So overall, just keep in mind that it's basically purely luck as to what you get for stealing off of enemy targets, but always remember that the game will automatically decide whether or not you'll get that item, and whether or not it's a common or rare steal really depends on what the game decides. So my next tip, of course, is or I should say advice, is actually affects the scenario arc that occurs a little bit later in the World of Balance. So after you beat Ultros, Locke and Sabin will be out of your party, and from there the player is thereby assigned to decide which of the routes they want to follow, because at the end of the day, all 3 routes lead to Narshe. So my piece of advice in regards to the scenario arc is this. There is no right or wrong way as to which of the scenarios you do first or last. But what it does matter, though, is whether or not you want the rages, or all the rages available at this point in the game, or whether or not you want get all the best available gear, weapons, etc. immediately. So Sabin's scenario is arguably the longest in the entire game, but if you do decide to do that first, I mean, you do lose out on some rages like Goldbearer or even Darkside. Both of them have Gouge and Blizzard, respectively, but you'll get access to better defensive and gear, weapons, and even some relics that you would not normally get in both Terra and Locke scenarios. And basically, if you do decide to go with Locke and Terra scenarios first, it is possible to get all of the available monsters to appear on their arcs into the Veldt. Because any encounter you do encounter, regardless of what enemies you fight, they're going to mostly appear on the Veldt. Now, there are some monsters Gal will not be able to learn, regardless. But that's also a very important thing to remember, too. I'm going to go ahead and save over this, because this will be a new playthrough. But overall, there is no right or wrong way. If you want to, another final important note about the scenario arcs, Terra's arc is always the shortest, whereas Sabin's is the longest, and Locke is more of the intermediate. Let's just put it that way. So in regards to rages, unless you're going to go for every rage in the entire game, my next piece of advice is always encounter the enemy, all available enemy formations in a dungeon. Because that's going to be very important to not only have Gal learn the rages, but here in World of Balance, after we complete the floating continent, all those monster formations are going to be gone. There are a few exceptions, because all the monsters that hang out in Zozo's outside and indoor areas, as well as the underground basement of the mansion in South Figaro, all those enemies are going to be still there, but all the other enemies in World of Balance will be gone after we transition to World of Ruin. So make sure you encounter every enemy if you want to get every rage in the entire game. That's also very important. Another important fact to remember is that World of Balance does have some dungeons that we will not be able to re-access or even encounter those monsters after a bit. So Figaro Cave has 2 monster formations that appear depending on your current placement in the game. So when you go through Figaro Cave the first time, it will have mostly hornets and 2 other enemies I can't think of for the life of me. And basically, you want to encounter all 3 of those monsters. Figaro Cave, after locked scenario up until the end of World Floating Continent, we'll have Goldbear, Cactoraptica, and Permanenites. So be sure to encounter those when you get a chance. Very important if you're going for rages or whatnot. So you only get like 1 chance to encounter those creatures, and you definitely want to take full advantage of that when you're still right around World of Balance for the most part. And not to mention these dungeons like Phantom Forest, the Imperial Encampment, the Esper Cave, the Seal Cave route, among others. Those are going to be like one-time things only. I mean, you can still go into most of the dungeons in World of Balance, but after World of Ruin starts, you will not be able to encounter those monsters again. Items will change over if possible. And that is very important to keep in mind when you're playing Final Fantasy VI and going through World of Balance for the most part. Now, my next piece of advice in regard actually occurs right after the invasion of Narsh. Technically, there's 2 points in the game where you're required to, where you have mobile party members, but you're only allowed to take 4 along with you for the most part. Because the first 2, you're allowed to take any 4 party members with you when you go search for Terra and Zozo. But when you go to the Imperial Lands, you're locked to both Locke and Celeste. For the most part, if you're going for the Imperial Lands, Gao and Edgar are probably the best candidates to take with you in both Zozo and the Imperial Lands. But at the same time, while they're pretty good, it's also important to remember that by the time you go into the Imperial Lands, you will start getting access to Espers, which means you'll start getting level up bonuses, so long as they equip the said match site. So my tip in regards is basically decide, in addition to which party members you decide to bring, you also want to take notice to which party members you want to prioritize getting stat boost for level ups when the opportunity arises. So technically Cyan has probably the worst magic stat in the entire game. He's also not one of the better characters to bring into the Imperial Lands, but if you see me play, I usually take full advantage of bringing Cyan and make sure whatever levels he gets on that level helps him get whatever magic boosting stat boost whenever possible to Kite Seath on level ups. And that's to help him get his magic stat out of the 25 and start getting into a more respective stat level for the most part. This can also be applied to stamina, and this can also be applied to HP, MP, whatever. Ah, he tricked me. How dare he? But technically, even though you want to prioritize your party members to get in terms of making it more easier to fight bosses, etc., you also want to take notice to which party members would probably need the stat boost and whatnot, because that's also another very important aspect about selecting which members you want to bring with you. So it's not just to make the trip a lot more easy. It's also more important to build up your stats as well. My next tip actually involves leveling up. The next tip in general is be careful as to how long you want to prioritize leveling up your team. Now, in Final Fantasy VI, the Esper system, aka Magicites, actually governs your stat gains. You will always gain HP and MP increases on level up. Those are always guaranteed, even though we do get some additional HP and MP increases through certain Espers. But it's always important to remember is that for every 10% of HP you gain from those level up bonuses, you only gain 10 HP in addition to your HP increases. So those are always static in terms of HP, but you're just adding a little bit on. Sometimes a little bit of add-ons can actually improve for the long haul. Now, technically, some characters will need to have the HP and MP bonuses on certain levels later on when they go into level 70 to make sure they get 9,999 HP as well as 999 MP for the most part. So be very careful as to focusing on your stats for the most part. Now, technically, if you check my guides, you'll definitely know some party members will actually do better in one specific category, whereas they do well in the other. Now, Terra and Celeste are actually gifted for spellcasting for the most part. You definitely think you would prioritize most of your time getting that up. But it's also important not to neglect their strength stat because they also get access to some very good swords later on in the game. So you definitely want to put some points towards strength as well. Stamina is usually avoided like a plague for the most part. You don't really need to boost it up because that actually affects the amount of damage you get from poison and sap. But even though whenever you level up with your party members, the damage is kind of set, regardless. But more stamina means you actually take more damage from those effects. But another important fact to keep in mind is that having some more stamina actually means you can actually resist instant death attacks. That could be a very huge big deal if you want to avoid getting hit with an instant death spell or instant death attacks. But for the most part, if you're prioritizing only one stat, that doesn't really matter. Now, agility actually affects your ATB bar for the most part. So having more speed actually, agility actually gets your ATB bar in a good position where your character will get another turn right as the start of the battle kicks off. So that's also important to keep in mind. Just because you're going to focus mostly on magic and strength, as well as later on HP and MP. It's also not a bad idea to put a few points towards agility and stamina, so that way they can get a little bit more off the long run for some other stuff too. But overall, you definitely don't want to be focusing so much on your one stat that you forget to put a little bit more points towards the others in general. Now, of course, whenever it comes to leveling up your party members, uh, anyone that speedruns this game or does low-level gameplays, they will always keep their party members at an extremely low level. So by the time they get into World of Ruin, they're in a good position where they can start leveling up their party members, and they can basically start racking up whatever stats they want to get. It's very important to keep that in mind in general. But if you're like me, like you don't want to do a low-level guy, but at the same time you don't want to over-level your party members, it's always important to plan ahead in regards to levels. So right now I'm going to get Terra to level 6 and stop leveling up Perm until we get Locke on board. And then once we get him and Edgar on board, we're going to prioritize getting Terra to level 13 so we can get Sabin to level 15. And then pretty much from there, we're going to try to get all of our other party members to level 15 and stop right there. Except for party members that will join up a little bit later in the same scenario. But after that, once we get through the Evasion of Narsh, we prioritize getting our party members to level 17. And then once we get them to level 17, we don't level them up until we get through the Imperial Lands. And from there, I build up my team, all my team members, including Mog, up to level 22. So once they get to level 22, I stop leveling them up on bonuses and whatnot. And once all the available party members in World of Balance are done, I level them up to level 31. Now, if you're wondering why I'm doing this at certain set levels, one thing to keep in mind is that there are level-based spell lores in the entire game, Blue Magic, aka. Which means if my levels are at the range of level 3 Confused, level 4 Flare, or level 5 Death, I'm going to be hit with those spells, and that can be pretty nasty, especially level 5 Death, which you do not want an instant game over. And of course, level 4 Flare is pretty nasty because that means you'll take tons of damage. And if you don't have peace rings or ribbons equipped, it also means you're going to get confused if your party members are at level 3 divisibility. So level 31 is definitely the ideal level before you go into World of Ruin, because that way, if we run into Death Gaze, we will not get hit by his instant death level 5 attack. And technically, I keep all my party members stop gaining XP. This is easily done on the Pixel Remastered version, thanks to the ability to shut off the XP gain to 0. But if you're playing the past versions, you definitely want to run away from just about every battle you come across. There are some monsters, including normal monster encounters, that will force you to fight your way out of it. So that's also another important factor to keep in mind. But technically, if you want to keep it low level, you can do that. But just remember is that, and we've all done this. I've done this when I first played this. Level up my party members, never really take into account building up my stats. Is that we all leveled up our party members in the past, and none of us really took the seriousness of the stat gains until we figured out the system a little bit more later and gained more knowledge about the game. So overall, be very careful when leveling up your party members. If you do decide to level them up, just do it at set intervals. So that way, not only is you're keeping your party members safe from level spells, you also have your parties at a pretty good level where they won't get game over pretty easily, and they have plenty of HP to keep themselves alive. Now, my next tip in general in regards to learning spells, any party member can learn any spell they want in this game, regardless as to whether they're good at magic or not. But aside from healing spells and attack spells, there is one spell, in my opinion, that you should no doubt have for all party members, regardless of whether they're going to be learning magic or not, and that is to always learn Osmos. Osmos is going to be your more definite go-to recovering most of your MP. You only spend 1 MP per cast, and that's going to help you fill up your MP pool more quicker than loading up on ethers. Unfortunately, items in this game kind of stink, and sadly, ethers are not very great in this game either. Not to mention, turbo ethers and high ethers are extremely rare. So this makes Osmos a more reliable way to recover your MP as opposed to relying on ethers. Now, of course, aside from your Osmos spell, having access to revive and healing spells and Ensua are also good. You definitely want to have access to your basic elements like fire, ice, lightning, poison, earth, or anything that deals elemental damage. You're going to want those access to spells, but at the end of the day, just about every party member can learn whatever spells. It really depends on player's preference. But overall, I would strongly recommend having the Osmos spell on all party members at all times. Now, in regards to Shadow, he can be recruited up to 4 times per in the World of Balance, but in my opinion, it is definitely not a wise idea to recruit him on the second time. He'll be recruitable again at Kolinge. I mean, that's good if you want to update his gear, if you decide to take it from him, which you should always do for his ninja gear at least. Whoops, did not mean to do that. I usually avoid picking those up. But anyway, for the most part, you do want to do not want to recruit Shadow when you go search for Terra. And that's because, unfortunately, when that happens, he still has the option to run away, but even if you do decide to recruit him for your trips to the Imperial Lands, he will not go because of the Opera House. So unfortunately, it's not a wise idea to bring Shadow at all, not to mention you're going to be down 3,000 gil when you do this, especially when you're going to want to get more better equipment, for the most part. So it's best to leave Shadow out for the most part, for that second part, even though it will be a little bit longer than normal. Now, you probably see me reset it just now. My next tip and advice is to, if you're going to be coming back to areas in World of Ruin, that still exists from World of Balance. It's always not a good idea to pick up every item from chests as well as anything that can be found in objects. And that's because some of those items become way better in World of Ruin as opposed to World of Balance. Now, technically, if this is your first time doing this, playing the game, it's not a bad idea to pick up the items. But when you get more experience and get way better items, it's probably a good idea to just forget those, come back to World of Ruin, and pick those up for better items. Because one of those chests actually has the almighty pod bracelet, which gives you protect and shell, whereas we would have gotten a phoenix down if we chose to pick it up right now. So in other words, you get some better items if you choose not to pick them up. Now, of course, this does not apply to everything in World of Balance because the basement in the rich man's house in South Figaro still remains static for the most part. Alright, let me think. What other piece of advice that I should give to everyone currently watching? Ah, it's also very important to keep any gear with stat boosting effects. Now, technically, green berets which you get from beating satellites, they give you decent evasion as well as HP increase as well as a very defensively good item. But at the same time, there's also not so high level defensive items that have some pretty good effects. Magus Hat can boost up magic, like Silk Robes can give you more magic as well. Twisted headbands, which you get at Collinge, are going to be excellent for picking up strength boosting gear. Now, Cyan and Mog are arguably two noble characters that don't really get a whole lot of stat boosting headgear, and Twisted headbands actually a very good item to have if you're especially going to make Mog a Dragoon, and Cyan wants as much strength as possible with him. So if you pick up any gear that boosts any of the magic, strength, agility, or stamina, or HP, it's best to hold on to those because some party members can actually equip those, and they'll probably want to have access to whatever stat boosting gear available. And that is very important to have in World of Ruin as well, because defense isn't a very huge deal in Final Fantasy VI, but it does really matter if you're playing more at high level to get through. And having extra stat gains is always best to have, especially when you're fighting more stronger enemies in general. Now, of course, if you're going for rages with Gao, my next piece of advice, like I said earlier, always make sure you encounter every enemy rage. You don't have to win the battle to make that enemy formation appear. You can run away from those enemy formations and they still will appear on the belt. But one thing to keep in mind about the belt is that each pack is designated, will have different monsters ranging between sets from 0 to 8. So the game will randomly decide between those, and you're going to be in for a very long time trying to get rages because not all of them will appear at once. But in regards to rages, the Velt in general, if you're trying to build your funds, I would strongly recommend using the Velt as your means to build up your funds for Gil. Now, it does become a little bit of a better place to rack up AP eventually, once you start encountering some more better monsters in general. But the Veld is actually the best place to build up your money, because you're always guaranteed to win Gil no matter which monster formation you engage, for the most part. So it's always a good idea to use the Veld to build up your money, and that's also very important if you do not want to build up your XP. So take full advantage of the Veld, always build up your funds, that way you won't have to worry about having to fight monsters and having to go through all the mess to get more funding. And that'll pay off in the long run too. And probably my final piece of advice I want to give players, especially those who have not played Final Fantasy VI in a long time but forgotten some of the basics, always go to the Adventurer School. That school helps players get into learning the basics of Final Fantasy VI. And it's very important. I mean, I always go back every now and then to brush up on anything especially I haven't played in a long time, because sometimes learning all the basics is always important. I mean, you can't just really can't really just expect to think having the best gear and everything is important, but it's also important to learn the mechanics and everything assigned to the game. And for the most part, it's always important to brush up your skills. So if you haven't played in a long time, I would strongly recommend going to the Adventure School in Narsh and basically take full advantage of brushing up your knowledge and memory for the most part, and that will help you out in the long run. Now, there is one good thing to use about the Adventure School that I'll cover for my last tip, but hang on one second. So anyway, my last and final tip for this tips and advice is to take full advantages of areas where you can instantly heal your HP and MP pretty quickly. Now, the Adventurer's School has access to a bucket that has the ability to heal your entire party. So basically, you restore your HP, your MP, etc. So basically, any area that has this, like the Adventure School, when you go to the World of Ruin, or Phantom Forest, or anywhere that gives you free healing, and you definitely want to build up your team's levels, or even Thanos' End, where after you advance a certain point in the main story where it offers you 1 gil per rest, take full advantage and use that to level up your team or anywhere. Heck, you can even use tents and save points to always go back, fight monsters, heal, rinse, repeat. Always have an area where you can always go back and heal. Now, Phantom Forest, you probably won't use that for XP gain, but you can also use it as a means to build up your AP, which is useful for learning spells. And that will be very useful in the long haul. So anyway, these are my tips and advice for Final Fantasy VI World of Balance. And I hope this helps players get into this game for the most part. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was not an important call. My apologies for that. But anyway, as I was saying, I'm hoping that this beginner's guide helps players get into Final Fantasy VI, and hopefully you get to enjoy it. There will be another guide for tips and tricks about the World of Balance, so that hopefully it'll help new players get into this game. Hopefully. But it's also very important to pick up other knowledge and wisdom on other sources as well. So just apply this as well as anything you learn from watching other guides or playthroughs. Hopefully this will help anyone get into playing Final Fantasy VI, and that is my ultimate goal, to help any beginners or newcomers get into this. So once we finish this battle, we're going to go ahead and close the stream, and I will highlight both the Marvel Superheroes Hulk Beginner's Guide as well as this a little bit later, and I'll have it posted later this week. Alright, so let's finish this battle with the guard leader. So once you steal the Mithril Knife, focus on getting rid of the guard, because if you take out his Silver Lobos first, he will use the charge attack, and that deals way higher damage than most of your party members can easily deal or withstand at this point. But anyway, I'm going to go on ahead and close down for the day. I will see you all tomorrow for DK Bonanza, and I'll catch you all later. This is RotorStorm331 signing off. Have a great day. Take care, and I will see you all next time.